What's up, guys? I'm Ryan Roberts. Welcome into another edition of the At Large Bid Bearcats podcast, brought to you as always by Riverfront U. Tonight, we are joined by 2025 6'3", 243-pound Cooper High School defensive end, Austin Alexander. Austin, welcome in.
Hey, what's going on? Thanks for having me today.
Yeah, absolutely, man. You're having a big season so far. You're off to a great start with Cooper, 46 catches, 787 yards, 11 touchdowns. Defensively, you already have 14 sacks, two fumble recoveries, and 58 tackles. How's this season going for you? Obviously, you're having a big junior year.
Yeah, it's been a fun season for sure. Just been trying to be there for my guys. We have a game plan each week. We have really good pieces on both sides of the ball. So I'm just trying to fill my part and make plays for my guys. And it's been a lot of fun this year, just seeing what we can do.
Let's talk a little bit about you as a player. You're currently rated the number 2 player in Kentucky, which is crazy. I actually had to look up to see who's rated ahead of you. High 3-star, low 4-star type kid, offers from Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, Cincinnati, West Virginia, Louisville. The list goes on. What's this recruiting process been like for you so far?
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Me personally, I just know God's gonna put me where I need to be. So I just been sitting back and just seeing different recruiting tactics and not really stressing about it and just trying to figure out where's gonna be the best place for me. It's been a lot of fun. Getting love from national programs that their brand is bigger than I can even fathom, and just getting that love from different coaches. It's been a lot of fun and really cool.
So one of the reasons I wanted to bring you on tonight, you were on Cincinnati's campus last weekend for the Iowa State game. Let's just talk a little bit about that. What was that visit like in the atmosphere?
Yeah, the atmosphere was incredible. I've been in Nippert Stadium before, just with the different staff, and the fans are just always incredible. I'm just coming out, just going crazy. The student section, of course, incredible. When the band runs down the stairs, it's just an incredible time for sure. And, just feeling the love from all the coaches and the entire staff. Really, everyone know who I am, making sure I'm in the right place at the right time. Getting to see coaches before the game. They did it very well, and it was a great time with the atmosphere and just getting to experience it.
So Coach Walt Stewart, that's your lead recruiter, obviously a guy that played at Cincinnati. What has his message been to you throughout this recruiting process?
Yeah, so I mean, he just been making it very clear that he wants me to be that program changer and just come in and be that pass rusher that makes plays and be disruptive for the Cincinnati defense. He thinks I can play both sides, both the stand up end and the field end, and make a difference. Doing both of that. Yeah, he's just been recruiting me really hard and just letting me know I'm a priority.
You're obviously having a big junior season on both sides of the ball that for most kids, that's what they do in an entire year, and you still have multiple games left. Do you have a preference on the offensive side or defensive side at the next level?
I like defensive side is definitely where my heart is, but it never hurts to score touchdowns. So if there was a spot that wanted me to play both sides, I wouldn't be opposed to that. But defense is really where my heart is set for sure.
How do you think that versatility and experience playing on both sides of the ball helps you with seeing what the other side of the ball is doing to you, regardless of whether you're playing offense or defense?
Yeah, it just lets you get to see what works on both sides. So whether I'm blocking an end, seeing like what tactics do tight ends or even tackles blocking down on ends. What do they use? What works? What doesn't? How to beat people who lean. If I'm leaning too much on when I'm blocking someone and I feel myself get off balance, how can I use that against someone who would be the tight end going against me? Different stuff like that, or even being in coverage, knowing how to run routes and get around people, kind of using that against them and knowing where, whoever I'm guarding, the running back or the tight end is going to go.
So how would you describe yourself as a player? Is there anyone in the NFL that you maybe try to model your game after?
Yeah, I'd like to say my pass rush is very polished, and and something I really work on. So someone to the likes of Nick Bosa or T.J. Watt is kind of where where my game kind of lands at. I'd like to be like a Myles Garrett type player as well, with my athleticism. Um, even standing up a little bit more, which would be more like a Von Miller kind of type player. That's who everyone kind of bases off of, or stand up also like Micah Parsons. So that mix of pass rushers, but also working a little bit in space. When they need to, I feel like I can bring that to the table.
So you're getting a lot of different recruiting pitches when you're on these visits. What are you personally looking for in not only a coaching staff but also a program when you do ultimately decide on where your next level will be played?
Yeah, for me, everywhere really has this just about the same, locker room pitch. Oh, we're getting a new one here. Weight room pitch. We have the best whatever. Even down to the school. Everyone somehow has a top 5 business school or top 5, whatever. So
Yeah.
those to me, I'll get around to those, when it matters. But I really am what I'm looking for is relationships, and who I really think being with every single day for the next 4 years is going to get me to the next level, physically, mentally, and spiritually. So whoever I think is really going to invest in me and get me to that next level, is where I'm going to end up, and what I've been really sifting through and looking for, and seeing what's business and what's for show, and then what's real life talks that I've had with coaches.
So you brought up relationships, so I have to ask. One thing I've really noticed when talking to commits and recruits about the Cincinnati program, it's just the genuine relationships that staff tries to build, along with the recruiting guys like Cass Simmons and Zach Grant, Jack Griffith. Is that something you picked up on as well in your visit?
Yeah, 100%. All three of those guys you mentioned there. I have really real conversations with them, and they've been straightforward with everything. And then Coach Stu, and then even Coach Fook. I've just had really genuine conversations with them, and have been able to, and that they really don't put anything, like they don't like try to pizzazz anything. They just call it how it is. And like Coach Stu, I'm joking and laughing with him like one of my boys. So it's been cool, just getting to know them, and feel that genuineness that they're bringing.
So those who aren't aware, what are some of the visits that you've gone on to date, and who would you say is recruiting you the hardest?
This year I've gone to Notre Dame, Kentucky, Clemson, Purdue, Illinois, and then Cincinnati. I'd say right now, Cincinnati, Clemson, Notre Dame, and Illinois and Purdue are probably recruiting me the hardest. They have coaches who hit me up every week, and try to have that constant communication. North Carolina is up there, not as much recruiting me as those, but their pitch is definitely as strong as some of those. Like Mac Brown, he's texted me and told me I was a priority, different stuff like that.
So I have to ask, Sean Alexander, obviously your uncle, how often do you get it on these visits where you get a guy that says they either played against your uncle or remember watching him play when he was in high school or college?
If it comes up, it's just about every time. I mean, there's always someone remembering, my uncle, and it's cool to see different connections people have. Around here, typically it's just watching him or they played against him, but going on the visits, they actually played with him, or had a relationship or have some sort of story with him. So
Yeah.
that's been pretty cool to see.
So your Cooper squad is obviously in the thick of a playoff race. What are your plans for the rest of the season heading into winter workouts?
So yeah, going into the end of this season, looking to make a good run here. We're really coming together right now, getting some injured dudes back. Yeah, so looking to put it together to the end of this year. And then after the season, I'll go into basketball, and then be training with my trainer Jordan Nevels. And work to put on weight and continue picking up my speed going into the spring, and then just continue working.
So I go way back with Coach Sully, and I'm sure he wants to hear you say this, but how much of a benefit is it to be a multi-sport athlete and have that versatility at the next level, regardless of which sport you play?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really big, huge benefit. It just allows you to work on muscles. You wouldn't work on typically, in your one sport, just like working the same muscles. You can also get burnt out just being in the same sport year round or trying to just focus on that one. So just having that, having basketball for me just allows me to not get burnt out, just to work on different muscle groups. It's more jumping, more long time conditioning rather than short sprints. And then also just getting to play for different coaches also just allows me to adapt to coaches either in football, either new coaches we get, or it'll help me for college coaches as well. Also has helped me just grow as a leader, just getting to work with different kids. And then Coach Sully, I've always said that he's one of the best coaches,
Mhm.
regardless of sport in the Midwest. Really, he just brings the best out of everyone on the squad. And I think he's just helped me grow so much as an athlete, on and off the field. And I think it helps me grow even as a football player, just getting to play for him.
Yeah, Sully's awesome, man. He's gonna be tough on you, but he's gonna love you up at the same time, and
Absolutely.
he's always gonna keep it real with you. Well, Austin, let's end on this. What does your timeline look like as far as cutting down your list to a top five or top three, and when would you ultimately like to make a decision and have this behind you?
Yeah, so I'll either have a decision by January or next July. Reasoning behind that is January. I'm thinking there's a chance I may want to shut it down after junior days. I may they go pretty in depth in junior days. On they go to school. You get to watch film. They go pretty in depth. So there's a chance I shut it down then. And then July would be after official visits. So if I don't feel like I've really narrowed it down after that, I'll wait, do my official visits, and then shut it down July, and that'll be latest. I don't want to be still pondering during the season, because next year we got some really big things to do, just like this year.
Well, Austin, we appreciate you coming on tonight and wish you nothing but the best of luck the rest of your junior season.
Yes, sir. Thank you, man. Thank you.
I'm now joined by Joe Tillery of Heartland College Sports. Joe, welcome into the show.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. Joe, we met at Big 12 Football Media Days. Why don't you just introduce yourself and tell all the listeners who you are and what you do?
Sweet. So, like Ron said, my name is Joe. I work for Heartland College Sports, and we cover the entire league. And it was really cool getting to meet a lot of the Cincinnati guys and some of the new league, the new teams joining the league. We cover, all different articles, news stories, news breaks, whether that be something specific to one team that day or just something that catches fire. And then as well as podcasts, we've got individual team pods for just about every team now. I know with 4 new teams and then 4 more new teams coming in, we're still figuring that out. But it's been a joy to cover the league and just be a part of, all the new growth in the Big 12.
So, what was your initial reaction to the 4 new additions: Cincinnati, Central Florida, Houston, and BYU?
Honestly, I was stoked. I talked about it a little bit with a buddy of mine, just getting more schools in that have an act like a real passion for college sports beyond just like the immediate, I don't know how to say cornerstone type schools. Not to say that the 4 aren't, or like whatever the case is in that front, but it's like there's a lot of schools in college athletics now where it's like this is a breeding ground for NFL players or NBA players. We lose a little bit of that like the nitty gritty
Mhm.
excitement for college sports, and all 4 of the new schools have that, the same way that the rest of the teams in the Big 12 do. And I was just so thrilled. I mean, also getting schools all across the nation is huge, but just having more people that were excited to be there, that's the biggest thing. Like having that type of camaraderie with 4 new teams that join, then you have the mutual, hey, we're excited to have you here, and hey, we're excited to be here has been definitely awesome to be a part of.
So you're obviously a Kansas State guy. Of the 4 new additions, which one are you looking forward to the most, and maybe visiting or having come to Manhattan?
Well, I tell you what, each school has its own allure. I mean, there's definitely something different to talk about with each school. You've got obviously going around the league, Cincinnati's a storied program. There's a lot of great things around the city as well. It's definitely like with the four new schools, you see bigger cities rather than just like a Stillwater, Oklahoma or an Ames, Iowa, where it's not to dunk on either of these places, but like it's definitely an adjustment. You bring in a market like Houston, you bring in a market like Cincinnati, you've got Provo, and it's doing everything that's happening in Provo. But I think, and then also Central Florida and Orlando. But like I'm excited to go to each of the different four schools because of getting to interact with people like you, like getting to meet you at football media days was awesome, and just having that same bond. But I don't know if I can pick one above the rest. I mean, I think Provo is probably the easiest one to say just because of the football venue, but there's so many great things. I mean, going to Cincinnati, I've heard so many great things at Nippert Stadium, and I'm thrilled to get out there and see it.
So looking at the Big 12 venues, let the fans know your favorite basketball and favorite football venue and which places are must-sees within the conference.
Well, so I'm going to get my bias out of the way first because the Kansas State guy in me is going to say Kansas State for both. I'll talk about K-State and then I'll kind of jump into some others. So with Kansas State, I mean, Manhattan, Kansas is an hour west of Lawrence. For those of you that may not be familiar geographically with it, it's definitely got the small town feel, but it is so much more than that. Bill Snyder Family Stadium, the entire campus, every building on campus is made out of old limestone, which is really, really cool. Actually, it kind of looks like a castle if you've seen any of the stuff with the football stadium. The basketball arena, so it's Bramlage Coliseum right now. I think they just sold the naming rights, so we'll see what that ends up being. It is one of the most electric places in all of college basketball, and people won't represent that all the time, especially when you're an hour away from Allen Fieldhouse. It is something special, and both have their own allure that you have to be at. But I will get my bias out of the way and jump into the other schools. Obviously, for
Right.
basketball, Allen Fieldhouse is at the top of the list for everybody. Got to talk about that. For me, Hilton, I think is incredible. That's a must see. Hilton feels like a place you got to go. One that I will say is not a must see, and I actually have a vendetta against is TCU just because of that basketball court. You ever watched a TCU game? They
Yep.
have the overlay
Yeah.
on the court, and it hurts your brain. I mean, being there in person, it's a little less trippy, but that's my vendetta with that one. As far as football stadiums, I mean, I would say, if I had to separate them out, there's a lot of different places that you could talk about. Stillwater is one of my personal favorites just because of how close in proximity it is with the fans between the players. If you've been or you've seen the games on broadcast, like if the football team is right here, the fans are leaning over with like these giant paddles smacking the side of the stadium and
Mhm.
nobody can hear anything. It is an electric environment, but there's a lot of things you can talk about, different places you can talk about. But I was talking about it with a couple of Cincinnati dudes recently, just like everything that I've heard about Nippert Stadium at night. I mean, obviously the birthplace of night football. I think Cincinnati fits
Mhm.
so well as a venue, and I'm stoked to get out there. I think there's a couple of different places to be said for sure. But if I had to pick in terms of basketball, you look at the Hiltons, Allen Fieldhouse is probably the number one thing you have to experience because you feel the history there for sure. But if I can't get away from my bias, I will say those schools. But if I can, I will say Kansas State in both.
So how many different venues have you been to within the Big 12?
I think it's probably been about 7 or 8. I haven't made my full rotation yet just because scheduling is kind of awful, to be honest. And also everything costs money, which kind of sucks. But from
Yeah.
what I haven't seen, there's going to obviously the league just doubled in size. So you're going to have, you know, 12 more trips before the end of the year's over, it feels like. But there's definitely some that you can kind of prioritize. Like you can go to an Iowa State. Obviously, with you guys geographically, it's a little bit different, but for Kansas State, you've got Lawrence right there. You've got Iowa State right there in Ames. You've
Mhm.
got Stillwater. You can go to Norman. It's not too far away, but the expensive trips are going to be the Provos of the world and the Orlandos of the world.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
definitely, West Virginia is out there too. That's also a great place. I should have mentioned in basketball, but it is definitely an experience in Morgantown for sure.
So what are your thoughts on, obviously not this year, but next year? How crazy is it to think that Kansas State is going to go to Arizona to play a game? Arizona State, Utah, which, obviously going to BYU already, but how crazy is it to see those additions to the Big 12?
It is so wild. I just the work that Brett Yormark has done in this short of a time. I mean, he's been here for a little over a year and he's taken the league. Not that it was some just outcast league or thrown away or something crazy like that, but just the confidence that every team has in one another for the first time ever is incredible. And not to get away from your question, because
Mhm.
traveling out to, Tempe, out to, Provo, out to places like anywhere in Utah. That's kind of a ridiculous thing for me to think about, let alone just traveling, 2-3 hours down the road. This way you get to have a whole trip. I mean, we had a couple of our guys at a couple of different games already. Matthew Postins from our website went out to Cincinnati. And then you had, I think you also went to BYU. You had Derek Duke get down to Orlando. So it's just how geographically diverse the map is for the Big 12 is just, it's incredible to see. So I am blown away to think that the middle of the world, or maybe not the middle of the world, pretty damn close to it. The middle of that,
Right.
whole nation gets the opportunity to go coast to coast for sure.
So you were out at Big 12. The Big 12 basketball tip-off is no longer called Media Day.
Right.
Just first impression on Wes Miller and Cincinnati is in general.
Dude, Wes is a guy, man. I know I talked to you a little bit about it. Like we were kind of, with Heartland College Sports, part of our job is getting clips that are usable for not just social media, but just things that, might stir up a story or have something to go off in those fronts. And like with football, there's Mike Gundy. I mean, Mike Gundy is your guy from Oklahoma State. You're going to get clips out of that guy. There's some coaches in basketball you might, Coach Tang's a good example. Bill Self is Bill Self, so you'll get that. I didn't really know what to expect out of Wes, out of any of the new, four schools. Wes Miller falls into that category of a dude I'm glued to when he's talking. I mean, that dude seems really cool. And I think like he preaches a confidence that I don't know what I expected to hear, but he feels like a coach that's going to hit the Big 12, have success immediately in the league and just start to, I mean, obviously Cincinnati's a storied program, but a coach that really feels like one of those dudes that hits the ground running, regardless of change, regardless of the roster, kind of just feels like a consistent dude. But man, as a personality, that dude, I mean, you want to run through a brick wall for that guy for sure.
What were your thoughts on he obviously hit on the waivers, Aziz Bandiago and Jamili Reynolds. What were your thoughts on his take on that situation?
Well, I want to commend him first of all, because
he came out like, guns blazing with his response.
Dude, he deserves some praise for that, because I think there's definitely one way to handle it. There's never a right or a wrong way to handle it, but I loved what he did because he went out there and went to bat for his guys immediately. That's what you love to see. But with the two players that, aren't obviously you go to the appeal process or however the process works at this point, but these are two big time players, but they're also two big time people. And I think that's what gets lost in the mix a lot. Wes Miller didn't lose that sight whatsoever, but this whole waiver process, man, it doesn't make sense. You see Raekwon Battle get his waiver denied the other day. There needs to be a yes or no, a clear yes you can play or a no you can play, rather than just having this, endless process that seemingly Wizards decide on in the back of some room. We don't know what's going on with it.
Right. Yeah. Wes had another press conference today, and he brought up the same thing again. It's that, these kids made life decisions basically to come to Cincinnati based on guidelines that were laid out for them that you had to meet. I think it's 8 or 9 different boxes you have to check in order to be eligible as a second-time transfer. Don't know their situations personally. That's not something Wes will go into, and rightfully so. Their business is their personal business. But, when you have these kids making life decisions based on guidelines that have been set, and then they're ruled ineligible, it's like you said, they don't know how to handle it. They're confused more than anything else. They just see denied and they think, well, does that mean my college career's over? I don't get to play this year. What's my next step? And he brought up a big thing today. He says, this isn't just a line, but I'm most worried about their mental health if the NCAA doesn't get this right. And I think we're seeing that across the country with different cases. Obviously, Tez Walker, that could be a precedent set with when you get a state attorney general involved. That there's a lot of different factors that come into play when it comes to the NCAA and things they may try to avoid.
Oh, definitely. I think I just saw as well today with West Virginia, they had their attorney general chime in as well just this afternoon. And it's just a process where I wish we had some type of, some transparency. And I know that that's not really the NCAA's MO, is being transparent with people, but there shouldn't be this situation where a kid transfers, commits their life, commits their school, whatever their future, there's like maybe 3% of the entire NCAA that goes to the NBA and has successful careers in the NBA. It's a very similar thing with football. I mean, there's obviously more players in roster spots, but these kids are making giant leaps in their lives as 18, 19, 20-year-old kids. And then just to be greeted with a big red X, that's got to stop, man. It's got to change, because you can't just have this continue. I mean, there has to be some type of a regulation or some type of for, both Aziz and Jamil, you need to know, if you're going to transfer, am I going to essentially end my college career because nobody wants to see that happen. And especially like, with Wes, what he did a great job about is
Right.
talking about their personal stories. I'm sure they both have pretty dang good reasons as to why they decided to transfer. It's just like there's so many different little things that add up to it, but it's just crazy to see this whole trend continue across college athletics.
So let's switch gears a little bit. Were you surprised at all by Cincinnati being picked 11th or um, any of the Big 12 rankings when it came to college basketball at the preseason tip-off?
I don't know that I was surprised per se. I know that so in my case last year you had Kansas State hire Jerome Tang. And now looking back on it, incredible hire, guy goes to the Elite 8, third place in the Big
Mhm.
12 after being picked, 14th. And there was a real argument of saying like this could be the worst basketball team in the Big 12 by a sizable margin. And then Coach Tang goes out and has two All-Americans on the court, goes to an Elite 8. So like when you see these lists, I mean, obviously I jump into them and I care about them, but like with Cincinnati being 11th, I almost just feel like it's one of those where, granted, this is the best basketball conference in the world. So there's nothing to discredit
Right.
that by any means. But seeing something like that doesn't surprise me just because it's a lack of familiarity with the team, a lack of how we know they're going to handle themselves in this case, So I don't know that I was surprised. I think one of my favorite takeaways from the poll was at tip off, not media days, I guess, when BYU's coach mentioned that he was thrilled that the Cougars were picked to finish 13th because he has four daughters and Taylor Swift's favorite number, I guess, is 13. So it's kind of cool to see that. But no, I don't know if I was surprised per se. But it's just tough to make those decisions right now outside of 1 and 2 with Kansas and Houston. Then you have 3 through 10, and you could just flip a coin to decide who's finishing where. So there's going to be a lot of moving pieces for sure.
So looking at the football side of things, going back to those preseason rankings, who would you say has been your biggest disappointment this year?
Man, I mean, there's one answer in my mind, absolutely one answer, and it's got to be Texas Tech. I mean, there's been teams that have come close or they've had bad weeks or bad stretches. Texas Tech,
Mhm.
I'm looking at their team and I'm like, how are there so many people still employed after how this started versus how it's at right now? And I know I'm never the
Right.
guy that wants to call somebody out, but like this team had a legit shot to be a dark horse contender for a Big 12 title. Now they're flirting with the possibility of not getting to a bowl game. I mean, it's been a complete 180 of expectation versus reality here. And there is something to be said for quarterback injuries. I can't just expect them to win 9 games with a true freshman or whatever the case is, 8 games with a true freshman. But man, I think that you see the way that offense runs right now with Zach Kitley being almost afraid to hand Taj Brooks the ball more than 15 times a game, which is ludicrous at this point in the season. But that was definitely my biggest shock. I mean, there's other teams like Baylor where you expect them to be better than they are, and then they just don't live up to it. But I think that Texas Tech is the first one that you see and you say, this is an absolute disappointing heartbreak of a season for Red Raiders fans.
Who was your biggest surprise and why is it not West Virginia?
That's a good point. I think that to an extent, and this is to an extent, BYU has really surprised me. I don't
Mhm.
know that they got it's not even that they didn't get enough love because their schedule hasn't been easy. It's same as, similar to each of the new edition schools, but they've found a way to win ugly already. And I really admire that because that's a tough task for anybody in the league to do, let alone a team that hasn't experienced this level of competition immediately like that. But it's tough because you have games like the TCU game where it's like this team looks horrible. And then you have them, beating solid teams the next week, or like, keeping Kansas within 7 points, I think the final score was, and Keaton Slovis looks really good for a week. And the next week it's confusing, but they've definitely been a surprise. I mean, West Virginia is definitely the forefront. Iowa State has been a heck of a surprise too. I mean, all the gambling
I would
stuff,
agree.
yeah. I mean, it's just all of the gambling stuff, all of everything going on with that program. Matt Campbell's just finding a new guy to yell at on Twitter every day. It seems like, there's a lot going on in Ames, but then you see them go out there and play winning football with a new quarterback and a whole new system, it feels like, with the amount of people they lost. Iowa State, West Virginia, I mean, there's been flashes where Houston's impressed me, but obviously there's been some back walking in the fourth quarter of those situations a little bit. But I think that West Virginia or Iowa State is probably the guy that takes the cake right now.
So Cincinnati this weekend travels to Oklahoma State's team you're familiar with. Your Kansas State Wildcats have already played them this year. Just overall thoughts on Cincinnati Oklahoma State game based on what you've seen from both teams?
Well, to start off, I hope it goes better for you guys than it did for us. I mean, that was a tough 180 for the Wildcats, to say the least. We started off, and I think in that week we were favored by 5.5, 6 points. I forget off the top of my head, but then Oklahoma State comes out and absolutely smacks us in the mouth. And granted, this is the sucky part. Before I'll get into the actual specifics of what's going to happen, is going to Stillwater at 7 p.m. absolutely stinks. I mean, it's a heck of a venue. It's a great event to be a part of, but when you're the visiting team, that's a scary environment at that point. I mean, you have dudes that are 5 feet from you banging these giant, wooden slamming baseball bats basically against the side of the stands. Like, your coach can't hear your offensive coordinator, your quarterback can't hear people. So there's already that degree of difficulty. But I don't know. I mean, I wrote about it today on our website, and I talked about this game as a preview. Oklahoma State right now has, a four-headed monster in the backfield, all in Ollie Gordon. I mean, that dude is running through anybody he can find. Almost 300 yards rushing this past week. So that's going to be, stopping him is going to be priority number one, which if you can figure out that recipe, tell the rest of the Big 12, because somebody will have to do it this season. But I talked about it today. I mean, that's going to be Cincinnati's game plan, is you have to stop Ollie Gordon. And that's where you're going to have a shot in a certain sense, because you're going to have Alan Bowman make plays down the field, which I know Cincinnati's secondary has kind of been hit or miss this year, but there is a way and a game plan that Cincinnati could surprise people and get that first win. But then you look at the other side of the ball and you look at Cincinnati's offense, and it hasn't been consistent this year.
Mm-hmm.
You saw it against Baylor this past week where there's a flash and guys played for each other, which I think is a really great thing. But it's a lot of what ifs about this Cincinnati Oklahoma State game. And it's a little bit easier for me to take the proven team immediately. But there is a way that this team could band together in that sense. I mean, there's a lot of momentum rolling over. So I think that's at least a good thing to have, even though a loss happened. I mean, I'm a big moral victories guy. I know that's kind of a lame thing to say, but there's something there for Cincinnati if they can piece it together.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing with Cincinnati, you look at the stats, and Mike Gundy said it best. You look at their record, 2-5. You turn on the film, they do not look like a team that is 2-5. Sixth best offense in the league, third best defense. They've outgained 6 of their 7 opponents, which obviously the only thing that matters is points. They've had multiple games where they have 2 100-yard rushers. It's kind of mind-boggling, though, where you wouldn't think that when you take the stats into account that this is a 2-5 team. On the flip side, you look at Oklahoma State, 10th best offense in the league at 404 yards per game. Second to last in defense at 405 yards per game. But yet, they're one of the top 3 teams in the league right now. And I think Mike Gundy said it best. The reason that they've made this transition, what was it? They lost to Arkansas State or South Alabama earlier in the year, 33-7. Yeah, they lose at South Alabama 33-7, and they rip off 3 straight wins with 2 of the hotter teams in the league, Kansas State and West Virginia. And he said one of the biggest reasons for that in his presser this week was they got away from trying to do multiple things and just focused on what they're good at, which is running the ball. 4 offensive linemen are seniors, so a lot of experience up front. You got Ollie Gordon, second in the Big 12 in yards per game at 117 yards, 8 touchdowns, 7 yards per carry. I mean, he's, like you said, he's a horse back there. Mike Gundy in his press conference was saying he talked to his brother. And his brother said, look, you need to clear out 2 rows, let that horse lay down and sleep, and put some hay next to him and just keep feeding him. Mike Gundy's response, as always, that you're always going to get a one-liner, is go back to having a drink. I'll get back to you later tonight.
Oh, man. Classic Gundy, man. I mean, he's right. That's the other thing. Like, Ollie Gordon has been that team, and I think that, the KISS method is widely accepted at this point. Keep it simple, stupid. This is exactly that. I mean, that's the case. But, if you can figure out a way to slow Ollie Gordon down, which is the biggest if, like, that's not, an easy iceberg to deal with. But I think with that team, you said it, the stats do not agree that they're a 5-2 team. And that happens in college sports, but they have one of the, I don't even know how to describe it. There's an aura with this team that it's getting teams, like it's affecting people. And I think with Kansas State, you saw us, I don't think that was nearly the best version of Kansas State you saw. Obviously, Will Howard goes out there and throws 3 picks and has had a really slow start. But, you go back to that game, they did a lot of good things in terms of Oklahoma State. Like, defensively, they're a solid group, even though the stats don't line up. They've been solid in the red zone, but they've kind of gotten a stretch where they've figured out their brand of football. And I think it's a situation where they have so much momentum right now. And I don't see Mike Gundy handing that over very easily. But the second that momentum is stripped, that's where you're going to learn something about this team. It's just, they're playing you guys, then they play Oklahoma in that, in Bedlam, in the last Bedlam game.
Definitely.
So
Yeah.
you could get them in a look ahead moment. I don't think that Mike Gundy is much of a look ahead type guy, but there's some possibility there. But it is going to be a task for sure.
Defensively, they run a three-man front, similar to what Iowa State rolled out. What impressed you the most about Oklahoma State defensively?
There was a kid, man, Cameron Epps. It's a safety freshman, a true freshman safety. He could be, because he could be a redshirt freshman, but I'm pretty sure he's a true freshman kid. Had 2 picks, just flies around the field, floats around the ball at all times. They've got some good push in the pocket. You got a guy like Colin Oliver's out there and makes plays, but I think Cameron Epps is the guy to watch out for. He had 2 picks against Kansas State, had his first career pick 6 in that game, and he's just a ball hawk all around. The guy's contributed defending the run. He's contributed in the passing game. It's a dangerous spot when you have a quarterback that wants to force the ball down the field to an extent, which really bit Kansas State in that sense, because this kid he's jumping routes. He's floating around the football, and that is a dangerous sign, but they're gettable for sure. But they have that same, strong Mike Gundy bend, don't break mentality that is so, it's so iconic with him alongside. So you have to deal with that. But I think Cameron Epps is definitely the guy to watch for. He is an absolute problem for sure.
So when Cincinnati ran the 3-3-5 under Marcus Freeman and then Mike Tressel, the biggest weakness for that defense, as good as they were, was run defense. Is this an Oklahoma State defense that, with Cincinnati having multiple guys that can run the ball extremely well? Is this the game where you think maybe they should rely more on the run than letting Emory throw the ball?
Yeah, it has to be. And it's not about Emory in this case. I don't want to dunk on the guy or anything like that, but
Right.
when you do have a quarterback that's still getting his feet under him, figuring things out in the league, trust your run game, but especially in this game. I mean, Corey Conner's been a stud this year. He's got, he's averaging 5.5, 6 yards a carry off the top of my head. The guy is a stud back there. And I think you see him make plays in the passing game as well as the run game, but there's going to be moments to get him involved on screen passes and just get him out wide. But if you can establish a run game, that's going to put a ton of pressure on Mike Gundy. Because if it gets to a game where it's it's a West Virginia style game where you can kind of drag them down a bit, play ugly, win a tough game. Like Scott Satterfield's shown that in the past at different stops where he has the ability to win ugly. And I know that ugly might not be the best word to say, but if you could establish a run game there, get some guys in the backfield going, get Emory Jones involved in that as well. Like there is definitely an element because in the Kansas State game, the most successful thing for us was actually the quarterback run. So that's it bodes well. Will Howard, I think, was the leading rusher in that game with 100 and something yards. There's definitely an element of the middle of the field's got some openings in it for sure. So if you can get the right running back core in and Emory Jones involved in that, I think there's definitely some element. And then you take some of the clock too. So that's also a big thing. Don't let their offense drag you down for 12 minutes at a time down the field. So it switches things up a little bit.
You kind of hit on it earlier, but what are some of the biggest challenges of playing at Oklahoma State, especially in an environment where it's a night game? It's homecoming. Scott Satterfield mentioned everyone's gonna be feeling good. So what are some of the challenges of playing in that environment at night?
Well, you'll definitely talk about the fans first because that is the element. I mean, these guys have been, they've been in the parking lot drinking since 9 a.m. Doesn't matter if this is a 7 p.m. game. These dudes are ready to roll. So you got to deal with the screaming fans element, but the proximity is one thing that gets talked about a lot. And I don't want to just keep hammering that, but it is really like from me to this couch is how close the fans are. If I'm, on the football field, it is so close. So you have to adjust to a whole different level of communication because that's where it's tested. And if you are a team that's had any issues with miscommunicating, it's going to show again in Stillwater for sure.
Mm-hmm.
But the fan base, they know how much of an asset they are to the game. That is the toughest part I've ever seen is when fans know they can control the game or put an emphasis on the game. That's where it gets dangerous because your offense goes out there and it's the loudest the stadium's going to be the entire time. And you can make the argument that most fan bases know that, but there's something about Stillwater where they know, okay, hey, if our defense is going to get off the field here, I have to be screaming my voice out. I cannot have a voice on Monday if this football team's going to win. So they take it personal with every game for sure. So I think that's probably the biggest adjustment, as well as just, Mike Gundy established that place. And not established the place, but they revamped it. I mean, I think it's Boone's Pickens Stadium off the top of my head. It's really taken a step forward in terms of Big 12 home environments just in the last decade. So it's definitely a cool place to be. Are you going to be on? I know it's kind of a trip. Are you on hand for that game, or are you watching?
I, I'm up in the air. I know
Hmm.
I'm going to be in Kansas City Friday, but
Okay.
I'm not sure if I'm going to make that drive up
Hmm.
there on Saturday or not. So still up in there. I'd love to go just to experience the venue more than
Hmm.
anything. Is it worth it? Like, what's the drive like up there?
Stillwater. I mean, from Manhattan is usually where I was leaving from, so the middle of Kansas. I think it felt like it's about 3 hours, 4 hours from Manhattan. So I assume Kansas City is probably closer to the 5 range. Could be wrong in that front. I would bet 4 or 5 is probably what you're looking at, which is still a hike.
Is the venue worth it? To go experience a night game there.
Dude, I think it is. I think it is
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, there's the entire thing about Nip at Night. They've got a lot of great things in that with Cincinnati. This is a place that it's rocking. I mean, it's absolutely rocking, especially when they have a team that's capable of winning out and getting to a Big 12 title game. Will it happen? I'm not sure. I know that Oklahoma is a huge task, but it's going to be peak form Stillwater. So if you can get down there, it's definitely worth it. There's some cool restaurants to check out as well. And there's all kinds of people on Twitter that'll chime in and give you the exact, bar hopping scenario of where you're heading
Right.
from. So,
Well, we'll end on this, Joe. Just what are your predictions for the rest of the season? Who are your favorites for the Big 12 championship game, and who do you like for players of the year?
well, I think I mean, immediately it's tough to look past a team like Oklahoma, and it's tough to look past a team like Texas. I think one thing we saw this past week did change something drastic. I feel like at this point, because if Oklahoma State is going to beat Oklahoma, we have to have a whole different conversation. But I don't think I'm the guy that's going to go out on a limb and say they're going to beat Oklahoma. I feel like Brent Venables is going to know how to handle that a little bit better than the previous season, but I'll take Oklahoma as my early entry. They're going to be, the top seed in my mind for Arlington. But the game in week 10 between Kansas State and Texas, that is a great implication of deciding who's going to be there. Because if
Hmm.
you go through there, and now like the extra element of it is the game's in Austin, so that's one thing you got to overcome that. Kansas State playing better football, just shut out TCU the other day. They figured out some quarterback stuff, putting in true freshman Avery Johnson, but Quinn Ewers going down in that game against Houston is massive. And I never want
Hmm.
to, wish any ill will on the person, but with a sprained AC joint, it's probably not a 2 week injury. You're going to be out for a couple of weeks. And obviously, the guys behind him and Malik Murphy is a stud. We might see Arch Manning. I don't have high hopes of seeing Arch yet. I think it'll probably be Murphy more than likely. But that week 10 game between K State and Texas is going to be big. And I'm going to ride with K State. Obviously, if I choose my guy, if I don't choose my guys, something's up. But I like a K-State Oklahoma Big 12 championship game. As far as players of the year, I mean, offensive player of the year is going to be hard to look past Ollie Gordon. I mean, that's going to be your guy if he can continue this crazy, Barry Sanders respawn run that he's in right now. And then as far as defensive player of the year goes, the middle linebacker kid for Oklahoma, Danny Stutzman, he's also going to be another one that's going to be an absolute monster to talk about.
Right.
Newcomer of the year, there's some interesting opportunities there. I feel like Oklahoma's going to have 3 or 4 people in that conversation. So I don't know. It's going to depend how things go. But I think if you get some of these young quarterbacks playing good, Avery Johnson's a good example of that, but came in late enough in the season that you're not going to get the full experience with him. But
Hmm.
I would assume there's probably some young kid on Oklahoma that's going to take that award away. But those would be my picks for the championship game and some big awards as well.
Are you happy or sad to see Texas and Oklahoma go to the SEC?
I don't know if I've actually thought about it too much. I mean, I've thought about the loss and that stinks, but like, I don't know, man. I think like seeing you guys come in and then seeing 4 more teams next year come in, like this is the most, interlocked this league has ever been. So you lose a team like Oklahoma, you lose a team like Texas. Obviously, there's a sentimental nostalgia aspect. You're like, dang it, that sucks. But
Yeah.
if you're wanting out, who am I to keep you here? Because it doesn't feel like this train's going to explode without you. That's kind of where I'm at right now. So I know that, Texas, you're going on 13 years since winning the Big 12 championship, whatever the
Yep.
case is. And then Oklahoma, obviously the success they've had there, they deserve it. But I don't think I'm that sad. I feel like it's exciting to see where teams emerge. And then you bring in great examples for the league. You bring in great teams. Obviously, you've got Utah joining next year. Colorado and the Deion Sanders thing already. Like, you want to talk about the marketing loss or the money lost with losing Oklahoma and Texas. You bring in a guy like Deion Sanders. I mean,
Hmm.
what are we doing? What are we doing? You got the exact guy that's going to bring in multiple millions of dollars. You get Jerome Tang on the basketball court. There's some of this influence that I don't think the league is losing. So I'm bummed for the college football fan in me, but I don't know. I mean, I think that that's their decision. If they wanted to leave, then they weren't good fits for the Big 12. That's probably what I'd say in that front.
Well, and I think I'm glad you brought up Deion Sanders because a program like Cincinnati, fans are so used to winning. They're not used to seeing a 2-5 season. And I think a lot of them don't put things into perspective that this was a rebuilding year, regardless of whether Luke Fickell was here, Scott Satterfield was here, or anyone else was the head coach. And then you look at a program like Colorado, look at all the high level kids that Deion Sanders brought in. He's even struggling with the transition. Obviously, a lot of talent, very fun team to watch. They're competitive. But I think Deion Sanders is that's a dude that a lot of Cincinnati fans wanted. They were upset when he didn't even get interest in the job. But at the same time, I think fans just need to be patient. Scott Satterfield, there are questionable things with play calling at times, but at the end of the day, it's up to the players to execute the plays. So,
oh yeah,
we'll see what happens, man. I really appreciate you coming on tonight. It's always fun catching up with you. We had a great time out at the Big 12 tip-off talking hoops and just getting the lay of the land in Kansas City. I did want to tell you Keegan was disappointed that you talked him out of Joe's. He did bring that up on his podcast.
Didn't talk him out of Joe's. I mean, I probably said if you have time for 6 days of barbecue, you could hit one spot in every spot of the city. But I tell you what, if Keegan's listening, I'll tell him this. Keegan, we'll go sit down at Joe's together. We'll get the Cincinnati guys plus your boy, and we'll all go sit down and we'll just crush some barbecue together. Next time we're getting in Kansas City, we'll do it.
Yeah. I know I'll be out there for the UC-KU game in January. And then I'll obviously be out there for the conference tournament. What is the conference tournament like? Let's talk about that a little bit before you get out of here.
Dude, it's
Big
killer.
12 conference tournament.
It's killer. I mean, one thing, you and Neil both brought up a good example at the Big 12 tournament game, or at the at Media Days tip-off. You talked about how we all kind of mentioned it doesn't matter who's playing. That is a packed venue. It's a sold-out crowd. And I think that this week especially, there's been a lot of talk of the new four schools being like, let's move it to Vegas. Let's move it to Dallas. It's not going to happen. I'll tell you right now, Kansas City is the absolute hub for that place, man. When you're there at the basketball tournament, you're there to watch basketball, and you feel it in your chest. You feel it in your feet. You feel it in your soul. You feel it in everything, man. You walk in and you can feel basketball. And I don't know if there's a better way to describe it than that, but I will say one thing I was not happy about is, did you catch any of the Big 12 Eats stuff from the previous season? They brought in different food that represented each school.
I did not.
So they brought in each school had a representation, or they had pepperoni rolls for West Virginia. They had, some type of mac and cheese barbecue for Kansas. And then K-State, they brought in the Wabash Cannon Dog, and it was a hot dog with purple relish, and it looked like the most disgusting thing of all time. Didn't taste that bad, but I just wanted everybody to know I'm not happy about that. So if you go to the Big 12 tournament and there's a Wabash Cannon Dog there, I'm not answering for the Big 12 on that one. We're going to figure that out together.
Are you going to try Skyline if they have that at the Big 12 tournament?
Got to. Hey, you know what? Yeah. I'll try anything. I'm ready for it. I'm excited for it. There's been a lot of conversation about it. I think you saw a couple of coaches talk about being Skyline guys. Scott Drew mentioned something on those lines.
Yep.
I'm excited, man. I'm also interested to try the cinnamon roll mixed in with the chili stuff. I gotta get a little bit of that aspect and see what that's all about. So I'm excited to be a part of it.
I think that's an Iowa State thing.
So I've heard so much on Twitter where people are talking about yes cinnamon rolls, no cinnamon rolls. So shoot, I'll try anything once. We'll figure it out. See what's better.
Right. So so that's what they called the Iowa State Cincinnati game, the Chili Bowl.
Oh, right, the Chili Bowl.
Cincinnati obviously has Skyline, but it's not really chili. It's more of a chili sauce. It's more of a meat sauce than actual chili.
Hey, that sounds like it's right up my alley. The less beans, the more meat. I mean, that's a good day right there. I'm ready for that one.
Right. And then Iowa State, I guess, mixes a cinnamon roll on top of their chili, and that's where the debate came. But
since
neither here nor there, but
Bearcats fans, don't come for me on that one. So if I'm putting a cinnamon roll in your mouth for that one, I apologize, guys. So don't come after me for that one.
All right, Joe. Well, it's been fun talking to you, man, and we'll catch up soon. I'm sure I'll have you back when Cincinnati plays K-State in basketball, and we'll get together again sometime soon.
Sounds like a plan, man. Good luck with everything. You're killing it. I appreciate you having me on.